Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Very pleased to be here. My name is Donald Sampson, and I serve as the Climate Change Project Director for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. I'm a member of the Umatilla Tribe in Pendleton, Oregon. I'm a fisheries scientist, and I served as the former chairman of the Umatilla Tribe, as well as the executive director of the Umatilla Tribe. I also served as the executive director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. It was not long ago, I think it was February 5th, when I was here in Salem with the chairman of the Umatilla Tribe, Gary Burke, the chairwoman of the Grand Round Tribe, Cheryl Kennedy, and the tribal councilwoman, Karina Miller from Warm Springs, talking in support of the Clean Energy Jobs Bill. So I'm glad to be back again and pleased to be here and see you all. The Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians is a nonprofit organization founded in 1953 and represents 57 Northwest tribal governments from Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Southeast Alaska, Northern California, and Western Montana. All 9 of the Oregon tribes are members of the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. The Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians is dedicated to promoting and protecting tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, and self-determination of our tribal governments. The Affiliated Tribes is addressing, among other things, issues such as energy, economic development, fishing and treaty rights, health and education, and environmental issues, including climate change. As you may know or may not know, Indigenous people in the United States, including the 574 federally recognized tribes, are facing immediate and significant impacts from climate change right now. These sovereign tribal governments are committed to tackling climate change, just as you are, and particularly the impacts on tribal communities, our natural resources, our health, our economy, and our traditional lifestyles. My father was the hereditary chief of the Walla Wallas. And for you who might not know, the Confederate tribes is the Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse tribes. Much of our homeland is in southeast Washington and northeast Oregon, nearly 6.5 million acres. On January 25th of 2018, the affiliated tribes passed a resolution in support of the Oregon Clean Energy Jobs Bill. And we did a series of workshops to educate the Oregon tribes and the member tribes about the clean energy jobs. We're not only working in Oregon, but we're also working in the state of Washington right now on very similar legislation. And I must say that the Oregon tribes in particular have specific knowledge about clean energy opportunities on tribal lands and the potential to sequester carbon on tribal lands, and they have the experience with innovative partnerships and projects. I'd like to talk about a couple of those. And these are what I would consider rural investments in the opportunities from the Clean Energy Jobs Bill. So we think it's very important to understand how we would benefit from those, not only the tribes, but the rural communities we live in. Have any of you been to the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Pendleton? You've been there? Have you been to our Temuslit Cultural Institute? So those of you who have been there most recently will find that we built the Cultural Institute back in 1998. I was the chairman of the tribe then, helped with the planning. It was part of our interpretation of the impact of the Oregon Trail. And we built that with our own money. We built the facility. We used to call it, and if you've been to our golf course, we used to tease people that that was really our clubhouse. But if those who've been there, we got a really small clubhouse. But this huge museum was actually a very important part of the history and interpretation of the impacts and our culture. But it was built in 1998, and since then we've been working to reduce the carbon footprint, reduce electrical costs, because all of these costs are paid by the tribe. We fully funded and built the facility, and we pay nearly $2 million in operation and debt expense on that facility. It's a huge cost to the tribe. So we've been working to reduce the carbon footprint of that facility, reduce our electrical cost, and save money, tribe's money. Over about a 9-year period, we've avoided $409,000 in electrical costs by doing a number of things. One, for those of you who've been there, you've seen a wind project there. See a small wind project. It's a 50-kilowatt wind turbine. That project alone reduced our electrical costs by 20%. Most recently, we added a solar carport that provides shade to parked cars. If you've been out there on a hot summer day, you like to be able to get back where, number one, you've got shade, but number two is, and most importantly, saved 56% of our electrical costs. So between these two investments, we are seeing almost a 78% savings in electrical costs. And those are dollars saved in our community that we can spend on other things. So it's a very important example of how we believe revenues from clean energy jobs bill will be able to be reinvested in communities like ours. I also found out that the city of Pendleton, on a per capita basis, and I'm from there, I just saw the mayor, John Turner, flying here today on the same plane from Pendleton, on the per capita basis has the most residential solar in the entire state. Now, we're not keeping up with that. They're not continuing to reinvest in that, but that's another opportunity. So also, the other part of this project at Temeslik is not only the jobs that we provide at the museum, but we had to hire contractors, local contractors, to build both the wind project and the solar carport. So that's creating jobs locally for our tribal members. Most recently, we built when I was the executive director of the tribe, we built a 100,000 square foot governance center. It's our Capitol building. And we didn't have the resources at the time, but we planned that and designed it so that it could be solar, plug-in, ready to play. So once the resources are available, we could power a large portion of that, and we're also looking at wind as an alternative as well, of our governance center. Just like you might imagine powering this entire Capitol building, that's one of our goals for that facility. Today, we're now building a new 40,000 square foot health center, and we provide services to a large region, 4-county region, for health services to tribal members and federally enrolled tribal members. We are designing that as well. We don't have the resources to invest there. However, it will be ready for solar and wind power to help generate and offset our electrical costs. These are present opportunities we see right now. So I just wanted to make that as one point. The second point I'd like to talk about is, for years I worked as a fishery biologist. I worked with many of the farmers, the irrigation districts in Pendleton. I worked with Senator Hatfield, who was one of our great senators here from Oregon, to work on what's called the Umatilla Basin Project. And the Umatilla Basin Project was a bucket-for-bucket exchange of water from the Columbia to help irrigation districts. There's over 5 irrigation districts in the basin, to offset their water so that they would keep water in the river and use these reservoirs to provide water for irrigation. So we worked hand in hand with the irrigation and farming community, and it was not easy, but we came to a solution so that we could provide some certainty for farmers in irrigation, but also certainty for our efforts to restore fish. As you know, the tribe has treaty rights to protect those fish, and we've had to exercise that legal right in court many times. But in this case, we were able to find a solution, and that is restoring water, bringing back salmon, and making sure the irrigated agriculture community in Pendleton and Hermiston survive. Today, we're faced, of course, with the impacts of climate. We're seeing drought conditions. We've been seeing them for some time, and they're getting more severe. Drought conditions are increasing the water temperature, reducing our availability of water. We're seeing less snowpack in the mountains, and we know that this is going to affect the supply of water. That's going to increase the conflict, potential conflict. And we've spent literally billions of dollars to restore and preserve water, fish, and farms in the basin. But this conflict will continue to increase, and we have opportunities, I believe, to look at working with the irrigation community to find irrigation efficiencies, to allow them to be able to use their water more effectively and more efficiently. So this could be another opportunity, I believe, to invest funds from the Clean Energy Jobs Bill into rural communities to help offset and mitigate those potential conflicts. I know that many of you might are familiar with what's going on in the Klamath Basin. I talked with Don Gentry, the chairman. He sees that as an opportunity as well, a good friend of mine. Of course, they've got the conflict there as compared to in the basin where we've come to some resolution. So that's just an example, my second example. The third example is at Warm Springs. Anybody been to the Warm Springs Indian Reservation? So I worked as the CEO of the Warm Springs Economic Development Corporation, Ventures. Many of you might know who've been there, is that we lost our mill. 80 jobs were lost just 2 years ago. The mill shut down. There's no jobs. Already we're exceeding 50% unemployment in that community. And many of you know about the tribe has 650,000 acres. Of that, 450,000 is in forest land. And so we came up with a project to be able to use some of that forest land. It's the east side of Mount Jefferson. It's part of the land the tribe owns. We analyzed the entire forest of the reservation, and we looked at what of those forest lands could we put into what's called an offset program. And that would be in California, because there's no opportunity here in Oregon or Washington. So in California, the Air Resource Board has offsets. It's about, was 8%, now about 6% of their program. And we look to be able to do a couple things. One is utilize the forests, bring in revenue to the tribe, and create jobs and reinvest in our economy. And so we put together a 20,000 acre offset carbon forest offset program on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. It took us about 3 years to go through the verification, the modeling. Tribe has foresters. We actually did the marketing and sold those, are in the process of selling those credits in California. Some 2.26 million tons of carbon offsets. And it's going to bring in tens of millions of dollars to the Warm Springs tribe. We're going to use that money to reinvest into economic development opportunities in a rural community and a tribal community right here. Now, those dollars are coming out of California. We see that same opportunity here in Oregon if we had a similar program with offsets as part of this Clean Energy Jobs Bill. So that is going to, and the tribe this is a very critical project for the tribe. Those of you who might have tracked the tribe's history, they've seen a decline from their hydropower project revenues. They've seen the closing of their mill and their logging, which is a source of their major revenue, to operate and provide governmental services. So this is a huge opportunity for the tribe, and as you might be aware, the tribe supports offset as part of this Clean Energy Jobs Bill. And so that money is coming in. We're starting to plan these economic investments and create jobs on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. So those are 3 examples of how we see this as an opportunity. I'd like to talk a little bit then about the affiliated tribes. Knowing and hearing this from our tribal leaders, whether it be the chairman at Umatilla or Warm Springs or Grand Round, we put forward a resolution in January of 25th of 18, and we passed a resolution in support of the Oregon Clean Energy Jobs Bill. And as I mentioned, we have disproportionate impacts to tribal community. I hunt, I fish, I gather foods from the land, still today. Those are very important to us. Our elders, our women go up and gather roots in the mountains, still today. And we're seeing the impact to those native foods. We're seeing the impact to salmon, sockeye salmon populations. We've seen huge die-offs on the Columbia River of sockeye. Have you heard of that, what happened in the last couple of years? So we're seeing these impacts right now. And as a scientist, I've been studying this for some time. The Oregon state government acknowledges the disproportionate threats of climate change to indigenous people as well. particularly the threats to first foods and health, as described in the second and the third Oregon Climate Assessment reports published by the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. And we're not saying only here in Oregon. I was in Paris for the Climate Summit in 2015, and we talked to many Indigenous people, but people around the globe seeing these impacts. All Oregonians are experiencing the direct effect of climate impacts, including one, the long-term warming, which is a lengthening of the frost-free season and more frequent nighttime heat waves. I was in Washington, D.C. just a week ago. It's 67 degrees in the middle of February. If you guys go back to Washington, it's usually pretty cold. The coastal ocean is acidifying. Some local inshore coastal waters are warming. Ocean acidity is projected to increase by 100 to 150% by 2010. And I work with scientists from all over the world.
2010.
I'm sorry, 2100, sorry. Sorry. That'd be a couple years ago, 2100. Near-term challenge of sea level rise. I'm talking to tribes in Alaska, the Kivalina tribe. I'm talking to the Chinamachi tribe in Louisiana, who's losing their entire reservation. I'm talking to the Ho tribe in Washington, and they're seeing the impacts and displacement of their infrastructure for their housing. This is going on right now. We're seeing reduced snowpack. We know that by 2050, 30% less area will be snow covered in the U.S. West. And you look at a lot of the areas that they're focused on, and this is in Oregon. And these are studies that are done by the University of Washington Climate Impact Group, but a variety of federal and state agencies and tribal scientists. We're seeing disappearing glaciers. Has anybody been to Glacier National Park? Have you seen those pictures? I work with the Salish Kootenai tribe in Montana, and they've been studying the glaciers for years. Glacier National Park in Montana, there's been 110 glaciers have disappeared from the park in the past 150 years, and the remaining 37 glaciers are estimated to be gone by 2050. Changes in timing of stream flow, and this really affects both fish and farms. Related to changing, snow melt have occurred and will continue. Spring peak stream flows shifted earlier by up to 20 days, depending on the location. For fish that are migrating, the salmon that migrate out of these river basins, it's affecting their life cycle. For farming and farm use, it's affecting the amount and quality and quantity of irrigation. Rising temperatures, low summer flows will impact fish species such as trout and salmon, and we're seeing it today. There were huge kill-offs of sockeye on the Columbia River. We've heard huge kill-offs of sturgeon on the Columbia River, and we're seeing that on a regular basis. And I think those who lived in central and eastern Oregon, and even now Portland, saw this. Increasing catastrophic wildfires in California and Oregon and Washington across the West. Since 1970, the areas burned is projected to double by 2040 and triple by 2080. Probability of more than 2 million acres burning in a single year historically was 5%. By 2080, it will exceed 33%. And these are studies that have been published, been peer-reviewed, and there's a number of scientists across the Northwest that support this data, and I'm happy to provide any of this information, the bibliographies that I referred to here. For Oregon tribes and other tribal nations in the Pacific Northwest, we've been experiencing climate impacts for the past 15 to 20 years, and we'll see greater impacts now and into the future. A decline or loss of key plant and animal species, a loss of reservation land, such I mentioned on the Ho, the Chinamachi, a loss of cultural sites due to sea level rise, loss or changes in our traditional foods. How many of you here pick huckleberries? How many of you like huckleberries? How many like huckleberry pie? I pick huckleberries. I'm 56. I've been picking them since I was young. My mother, my father, my grandmother, all of our generations have done this. And we're seeing the impacts of huckleberry fields now, whether it be on Mount Hood and Mount Adams, or in the Blue Mountains where I live. There's been a period of time 2 years ago where we had less than 2 weeks to gather our foods. And we send up our scouts, which is our best women huckleberry pickers, to find out where these are. They've been tracking this for some time, and we're very concerned about it. So it's affecting not only economically, but our cultural lifestyle. And it has an impact to our physical and spiritual health, as well as our tribal economies. Therefore, the affiliated tribes endorsed the Clean Energy Jobs Bill. We heard from tribal leaders, and the resolution that they supported was to call on all Oregon State government officials, including state agencies, to ensure that Oregon tribes are full partners in developing and implementing the Clean Energy Jobs Bill in Oregon. Further, we support the proposed amendments identified by the Warm Springs tribe and other tribes, Oregon tribes, that one recognized the sovereign rights of Oregon tribes and fully incorporates them into the governance and oversight of CAP Trade and Reinvest program. Specifically recognize Oregon tribes as impacted communities, provides a tribal set-aside in each of the program funds, and promotes direct government-to-government consultation. Now, some of the Oregon tribes aren't here today. They weren't aware that this hearing was going on, but I'm sure that they would be. I know that today, many of them were here upstairs. Did you see them here today on the legislative day? But directs government-to-government consultation with Oregon tribes on all programs and investments funded and implemented as part of the Oregon Clean Energy Jobs Bill. My people from here, I'm half Scottish, by the way. My mother is MacDonald. She married the chief of the tribe. But I'm Walla Walla. And so, speaking on behalf of my Walla Walla people, we've been here in what is now called Oregon for over 10,000 years, hundreds of generations. We can't leave our homeland in Oregon like other people. We will be here forever. We have a way of speaking about it. We sustained a clean energy economy for thousands of years before the state of Oregon existed. Our economy was robust and strong. Our people were healthy and happy. Our air, our land, and our water was clean. We believe we only borrow this land from our children and our grandchildren. We know we must make personal sacrifices for our grandchildren's children. We did not let individuals profit from polluting our air, land, and water historically. We consider the seventh generation in every decision we make. This is our obligation and our responsibility. I know that this Cap and Trade and Invest program has been in development for some time. Many people have been working on it. And I think it's unfortunate the state of Oregon and the legislature and the governor have not been able to take this opportunity to move it forward during this legislative session. Over the past years, and particularly this year, many Oregonians throughout the state, some 830 businesses, 50 organizations from health, labor, economic development, environmental and rural interest, 140 farmers and ranchers, 128 faith leaders, and 50 local elected officials have been here in support, including the sovereign Oregon tribal governments. They support a better future for Oregon. They support cutting pollution in the air we breathe, building a stronger, more resilient economy, and protecting our future generations. We've heard promises from state leaders, such as the proposed amendment, to act in this legislative session to set the stage for the Clean Energy Jobs Bill in 2019. And we appreciate this effort. However, the real solution is to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Bill and be prepared for that, apparently in 2019. I hope this amendment would create a real commitment and real action by the state of Oregon. I would be happy to hear how this can be done. I believe there are many of you who see the wisdom of planning for your future generations, of sacrificing for them, of preserving a better place for them. Now is the time to act. I appreciate this opportunity, Unfortunately, I cannot stay too much longer. I have to catch the flight. There's only a couple flights back to Pendleton on our small airline there. But again, thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today. Thank you.